Yeah, excellent.
Okay, so Nick, I think perhaps what we might do is we might get started right away to make sure that we can cover everything off that we have in the session, because it is 30 minutes. So, so good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. My name is Michael Haynes. I am a customer marketing strategy advisor, working on SMEs, and director and founder of the consulting practice Listen, Innovate, Grow. So welcome this afternoon, and co-host is my colleague down in Melbourne, Nick Fagan, who's the managing director of Next Practice Management. Nick, it's been interesting times we've all had over these past few months, to say the least, with the pandemic and all the various challenges people have had on a personal as well as, business perspective. I think, though, things are starting, despite there has been, second waves, those sorts of things, which you know firsthand you're experiencing. Definitely from an SME perspective, there does definitely seem to be a lot of positivity, positive sentiment and resilience amongst our fellow SMEs, which is really, really good. Just read a report this morning. GoDaddy did a survey, and they found a global survey, and they found that 70% of SMEs around the globe feel they'll be making a recovery revenue-wise in the next 12 months, and 85% here in Australia. So very positive sentiment. And also in terms of their viewpoints with regards to growth, over 40% of SMEs in Australia are expecting to experience growth over the next 3 to 5 years, and around 27% globally. So despite the fact that we're, things are still, I guess, somewhat unknown in this next normal, there's definitely some positive sentiment and a real momentum now of people starting to really look to move forward for the remainder of 2020 and into 2021. Hence why I thought it was very timely and important that we undertake this live stream discussion to kind of initiate discussions. So Nick, what are some of your thoughts in terms of what you've been seeing amongst your contacts and colleagues with respect to the sentiment of where the SMEs are at now?
Thanks, Michael. Look, I do apologise for my appearance of my COVID beard. So, in terms of being in lockdown, but yeah, look, I think as you were saying, I'll just give you a bit of background. Next Practice is, we're a management consulting business offering coaching services for businesses, particularly in uplifting. And it's very sort of, at the moment, we're really working with clients to generate, as you say, on the back of that sentiment, them and unleashing their potential to become great places to work at, buy from and invest in. That's our DNA, and that's our why, effectively. So what we're trying to do is tap into that sentiment you're talking about. I think you're right. I think that there's been a change slowly, where I think people are seeing now a little bit more optimism. I'd like to test that theory here in Victoria, because we are in that lockdown. It may be a bit of a lag, but I think generally in speaking, people are looking forward. And I think that from my experience, Michael, to date, those organisations that had some business continuity in place were able to ride this out better. In fact, their planning processes were probably in place, so they're able to pivot, move, adjust, adapt quicker. But certainly, to your point, there is a positive sentiment, and people are wanting to talk with those providers and have those providers explain to them using our imagination what's possible.
Absolutely. I think there's a real sentiment of kind of we've got to get down to it and we've got to move on. And so hence, with regards to having this live discussion today, I really wanted to talk about, there are kind of 3 key trends that are really starting to come into the fold now that SME providers need to be really mindful of as they're, reigniting, restarting their businesses, looking to be planning and moving forward. I think there's 3 key trends that really have to be taken into consideration. The first one is a notion of increased protectionism. So given all that we've been gone through and the changes that have been occurring in the past 4 to 6 months, it's really going to be around, there's going to be a lot of increased scrutiny around safety in terms of your businesses being, COVID safe, the movement and handling of goods and services, be it by, customers, being by service providers, and also provision of services as well. So service providers are really going to have to what, not just how they're dealing goods and services, but if you're the, IT person and you're going into someone's home office, you're going into their office, you're the air conditioning person and heating, going into people's homes, how are you, engaging and handling with those customers? Are you having the right, what kind of procedures you have in place? And so service providers, product and service providers are really going to have to be mindful now of both how they handle their goods and services, how they're communicating, how they're interacting with their customers and their clients. There's a real big push now, as we've all seen, with this kind of contactless environment in terms of, contactless payment, those kinds of things. And that's going to really permeate across all various industries for both product and service providers. So it's going to be very, very important for SMEs, for business owners, to really make sure they have a handle on and get an understanding of what are going to be the implications in terms of costs, delivery and fulfillment, and what are going to be the customer expectations in terms of engaging with them. What kinds of information are they going to be wanting to see on your website? Are you COVID safe? What are your policies? What are your procedures of how you're going to be interacting with us, handling things? So that's going to be very important as part of moving forward, as part of the planning, part of your business operations, that you really have that putting your safety, protectionist mindset in terms of how do you engage, interact with customers, both their goods, services, and the provision of those.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic, Michael. I think that's an excellent point. And just in terms of that adaptation and change and the flow of goods and services, particularly talking about the road to recovery, there was a round table recently with the Business Council of Australia talked about, particularly cities, and having 40% of the population in 2 major cities in Australia has been a bit of a problem. And that's a risk to the distribution and consumption of goods. So now they're looking to, and there's the promotion of the unleashing of regional Australia to help support the flow, very much to your point, the flow of goods, services and people across the region. So another potential implication for business owners to consider in their engagement, how they go, particularly, not to steal your thunder, but you're going to talk about digitisation in a moment, but how to leverage that, that's not a segue, I suppose, but realistically, they're looking at all options. Everything's on the table here in regional Australia. I love the word unleashing the potential in regional Australia. Why not? If it mitigates that risk, why not?
Yes, absolutely. That's definitely going to be one of the changes that we're going to be seeing moving forward, which brings me to the second trend, which is really the whole accelerated pace of change. As we've all witnessed over the past 4 to 6 months, there's been a lot of change across, industries, in terms of how we are doing things. We've seen restaurants pivoting to offering everything from pop-up groceries to, I know of an individual in Canada who has taken chefs and has developed an online chef service where they can come into your home and be the chef to do your dinner parties, those kinds of things. Virtual events have really taken off as well. I can recall, Nick, talking to a colleague in February while I was back in Canada, down in Washington, when I got invited to a virtual event. And he was like, oh, Michael, that's nonsense. It'll never take off. Well, fast forward now, virtual events, not only have they become what we're using to engage and interact and deliver content, but the caliber and quality has been extremely high. I mean, I myself have been attended 2 virtual events, one in Chicago for the Business to SME conference, and then one on B2B marketing strategy out of Croatia. And the quality and the caliber of that event, both of those events, in terms of, access to speakers, the engagement, interaction, is quite high. So, and those are just a couple of examples. Other examples I've seen are where staging companies who do the equipment for concerts and plays, so forth, they have done their pivots and are now doing things like installation of in-home entertainment, building home office equipment. So there is this really accelerated pace of change, which I think for SMEs is going to be very important, as we're flexible and adaptable, and you need to be able to be adaptable and respond and deliver to the quality that your customers expect. So I think there's going to be a number of implications there in terms of making sure as part of your planning, you're moving forward, that you are continually adapting and resetting to make sure that, because as we're going through this next norm phase, there's a lot of kind of toing and froing. So we want to be making sure that you're meeting the needs of you understand the needs of your customers, meeting the needs of your customers, and you're constantly, revisiting within your teams, within your companies, to making sure, are we on the right track? What's new? What's different? How do we have to change and adapt in terms of either what we deliver, in terms of product, product, services, and support, how we deliver, and making those changes. So planning, moving forward, but in a very iterative fashion, because yeah, as we've seen, the adaptability and acceptance of change can happen quite quickly. And as product and service providers, we're going to have to also rise to the occasion to deliver to the quality that customers are looking for, and which we have seen, particularly amongst our own peers and SMEs, that we can really adapt and meet customer needs and to the level that they are looking for, which is increasingly increasing in this time where they want safety, security, convenience, and value as well.
Absolutely. I mean, this environment, you and I both work in that workshop environment, and I think from the safety perspective, it's a real bonus, you know, with respect to having this sort of contact, although virtual. It still has people accessible and feeling safe, because there's no risk of passing on sort of any infection or virus as such. But also, as you say, certain content, as you're saying, the interactive piece. And I'll say from a sales perspective too, when we talk about buyers and what they want, how do you bring to life that experience? You know, as you say, listening to your buyers, but how do you make this interaction in this medium meaningful in part of a discovery as to what they need? And to your point about listening to them, making sure this connection is not lost via this medium. It's a huge challenge, but certainly to your point, the rate of change, and we do talk about this 90-day planning, Michael, and I think the cycle of that 90 days allows organisations to stop and come up for air and see how their performance has been over the last 12 weeks to look at how to improve. But stopping after 12 weeks and actually analysing your performance based on your metrics around how are we engaging, asking your clients and buyers, how are we doing? You know, where can we improve in that environment? So I think that the ever increasing, as you will see, and you and I know that's coming, is the increased organisational drumbeat. It's starting to pick up, and the velocity is going to pick up. How do we keep up with that velocity? And that's why we're big on this 12-week cycle, because it allows us to pivot quicker and move quicker and adapt.
Yes, yeah, and to your point, exactly. It's very important that you have those practices and those policies in place, and be flexible and adaptable, not just in response to how you perform what you want to be doing, but also to what are those environmental changes. So, you know, if markets open up and all of a sudden you now have access to more markets that you can now travel, for example, or vice versa. If, you know, heaven forbid, there should be, you know, another way and they're locked in. How does your business adapt in terms of being able to service your customers, communicate, you know, fulfill your requirements? So building in that flexibility and adaptability. We're saying 90 days. In some cases, you may need to be able to be reactive and far more responsive quite quicker, because we never know what's coming around the corner the next day. But I think at least having that cadence and that practice putting in place to have that regular review and reset. The days of writing the one-year plan, you know, big PowerPoint document, and then just kind of sitting it there, letting it sit for 12 months, those days are long over.
I've forgotten what they look like, Michael.
Oh, yes, exactly. I've forgotten, and I have to say I don't miss not seeing them.
That's right.
I've done my days of doing the decks of the, you know, the business plans, you know, for the board and, you know, for the senior execs. So it's really about being iterative and being very responsive, understanding what are the threats, the opportunities, and being responsive to that.
I like that, Michael. And also, as you were saying, I think that execution of those plans, because often enough they'd sit on the shelf, but this is very much a live environment we're working in.
Yes, and I think that is going to be one of the key things of this new normal, this next normal that we're in, is that, operating in a very live, active, fluid environment, so that you really have to be quite flexible and adaptable, which is one of the key strengths of SMEs that we do have over some of the larger mid-market and corporate organizations, where you know, some of the things that we've been able to achieve, our fellow SMEs have been able to achieve even in this past time, is not something that larger organizations would be able to, you know, change their business models, coming up with complete new offerings. In some cases, tapping into new markets, but keeping on the pulse as to what's going on, and then building in that cadence, that process within your organization to respond, is really going to allow product and service providers to really rise to the occasion, which will only prove to their advantage. And then the third change I really wanted to talk about as well is this whole digitization, which has been the big buzzword over the past 4 to 6 months, which, you know, everyone says pivot, go online, which is easier for some businesses more than others. You know, those of us in service sectors, in the professional services, IT realm, where a lot of what we do can easily be done remotely. It's easier for us, but for others, you know, that are more product-based or more experiential-based, it can be more of a challenge. But there is an expectation now, I think SMEs, in order to, as moving forward, as a result of what's gone on the past 4 to 6 months, I think the whole online was always something that we as general consumers have always wanted, in terms of, you know, being able to have the convenience, you know, of doing what we want, getting access to information how we want. Now, all of that has increased even more so. From a business to business perspective, business buyers were quite demanding and fickle before. Now, even more so, they want to be doing a lot more self-educating, self-service online, self-educating, and gaining that information and ideas of what they need to be doing to get to move their businesses forward. So they don't want to talk to salespeople anymore. I think the latest stats are, I think, is over 75% of business buyers, they're going to wait till much later when they're further along their buying journey before they want to speak to any sales representative thereof. So it's going to be very encompassed for product and service providers in a B2B context, that you really have to be thinking proactively in terms of understanding who your clients are, who are going to be involved in the buying decisions, because even if you're targeting a micro business now, there will be at least 1 or 2 other people that will be involved in the buying decision. So you need to know who those people are, what are their priorities, and how do they buy, what do they want to be looking at, and providing that information, the insights, and also the guidance, because I've been talking to a lot of business owners, a lot of MDs, and what they're looking for in this environment right now is some clarity and confidence as to be able to make those decisions as to, in terms of planning, where are we going to focus, what are we going to be doing, how are we going to be doing those things. And I'm sure you can attest to, Nick, over the past 4 to 6 months, we've all been inundated with Zoom meetings, webinars, you know, lots of white papers. So there's lots of information, but they want to be able to get that distilled down to say, well, what does that mean for my business? I still have an objective in terms of growth, maintaining the, well, first of all, maintaining the business, potentially, you know, growth, diversification, what have you. How am I going to get there? So really, I think a big part of, as products and service providers now, selling is really all about really working with your clients and customers to give them that roadmap to say, well, here are the opportunities, here's what you can do, and here's how you can get there. It's really kind of that whole kind of, yeah, it's about the journey and being that advisor, that navigator in a sense, to really help them get to where they want to go. I think that's really going to have to be the focus, but it's about being proactive now, and really everyone's really taken to online, either by choice and or by force. So it is about us making sure that we are enabling buyers and making sure that we're giving them what they need proactively. So as they're going and seeking out information, guidance, that they're able to get that and see how you as a product service provider can really help them along.
Yeah, fantastic, Michael. I think in our experience, again, with the interactions that we've been having through our workshops and our coaching, is very much that guidance, and certainly reducing that amount of confusion for that clarity. That's the separation, and you've made mention of that. In terms of the buyers themselves, there's information and research that you've been sharing, and I've seen previously, is that as a buyer, what we're seeing and where sales people are failing clearly in that interaction is the leading through a discovery of my concerns, wants, and desires. Like, it's a discovery. It's very much very different tack than what, you know, a traditional sales line, and that's working with sales teams, how to change their mindset too, and engaging across this platform to not lose that contact or that personal touch. And I think it was in that survey by Rain Group, it was 71% of buyers are looking for that discovery and leadership.
Yes.
And only, I think it was 30% of sellers are actually meeting that need. That's a huge gap. And the other piece of that, Michael, in those discoveries is, please use our imagination. Show me what is possible. You know, please show me what is possible, because, you know, like that, if I am the buyer and you're able then to guide me to that point through that discovery, and less of the hard sell. I mean, that's I think cutting through at the moment. And obviously by way of skills, there's sales teams that haven't bridged that gap. And not to say that, and the third point clearly is about listening to me. Please listen to me. But certainly I think that discovery piece shouldn't be underestimated in the engagement, because it's not working at the moment.
Well, Nick, I would go even further. Say it's no longer it's a critical component now, because of where our fellow business owners, entrepreneurs, talking from a business customer perspective are at. You can't do as Kobe likes to say, show up and throw up. It's no longer about coming in and talking about the features and benefits, me, I'm so great. It is really about understanding that organization, those decision makers, where are they at? Where are they at today, right now? The 26th of August, where are their priorities? What are they trying to achieve? Where are they feeling stuck? And really understanding that, and then really figuring out how you're going to engage and help them in terms of getting along the way. So, and in order to do that, I think a couple of things need to happen, because again, buyers need that guidance, that insight, that guidance, the roadmap and the help. So they need that enablement upfront, which really changes the game. So I think this whole marketing, sales, a product, client delivery as being separate silos, they all need to be working together now. Business buyers, customers don't see the different silos within an organization. You're one organization, but they've got problems and things that they need to achieve. And so it's really flipping, and the whole selling, I guess, B2B selling 3.0 is really going from selling net, it's really to be really advisor, partner, navigator, I would argue. And that's really the approach that you need to be taking, and really showing how they're going to be able to inspire them, enlighten them, but also guide them as well as to what needs to be done, how they're going to achieve that.
Absolutely, Michael. And I'm going to remind you of your own words here, because they've resonated with me, my friend, is that piece that you're trying to position around the clarity, certainty, definitely, and the unwavering confidence. That's what we're trying to get across here. And as you say, it's moving away from that traditional sales model to be more that partner, that guide in terms of the interaction.
Yes, and that's really what's going to be quite critical to really succeed right now in this environment, when there's lots of, there's a lot of volatility, uncertainty. But again, businesses, we all have to move, businesses have to continue, right. They have to be moving forward. And so the decision makers, they want to be able to feel confident in and of themselves, not just about you as a product service provider, but in and of themselves to make those decisions, to say, okay, we've got to be thinking around the final quarter for 2020, 2021, what do we need to be doing, how we need to be doing it. And so it's really helping them to get that confidence and that clarity as to what they need to be doing, recognizing there are going to be all sorts of internal, shocks, shifts potentially, but they want to feel as though they really are clear on what is the way forward to help them, again, to navigate.
That's true. And that discipline you talk about, and the thing that we promote, is that cycle of accountability through those 90 days. And that's something that, when you talk about clarity and working through those with business owners and their teams, is to make sure that is stated up front, that number one priority with a number of sub priorities, map it. And actually, that knowledge, once it's mapped and committed to, it removes a lot of white noise for folks, and they're then able to talk to those particular activities and metrics that go with it. So that accountability framework around 90 days, as you say, admittedly, there's things that we get blindsided by, but we can make the decision of whether that's worthy of our time or it's noise that we can cancel out. Yeah.
And I think, again, building in that cadence into your organization, and we're saying arbitrarily 90 days, but if you build in that adaptability, that responsiveness of being in tune, listening what's going on with your external environment and being responsive, then you will be able to respond, should a shock occur on day 35 as opposed to day 90.
Absolutely. You did right. I think that's an excellent point. But I think that the key to that, and you touched on that, is, we promote internally with leaders within organisations, is to speak with your most important customers, maybe varied over once a week, with 4 key questions. The 4 key questions are apparent, is, how are you? Clearly in this environment, how are you? How are you feeling? Things that you're dealing with on a personal level, but saying, what is happening in your industry? Tell me. And the other question is probably more pointed, is, what are you seeing our competitors do or not do?
Yeah.
And then the fourth question is, Michael, around, it's simple enough to say, is that what should we do more of and what should we do less of as a business? And that's purely just to the buyer, picking those key buyers and getting that intel, because that data taken into those quarterly meetings, if you like, is the vital data that can help shape the next quarter's movements. But if you're doing that on a weekly basis and your management team is catching up on a weekly basis, you'll have that live data to move quicker, as you quite rightly point out. But ask the questions.
Yes, and asking those questions and having those discussions is quite important. It may not be feasible for many organizations to have those kind of discussions weekly, but I do think even if you are doing weekly, as businesses really need to be starting to think about the end of 2020, and really we need to start thinking about 2021, and how what are we going to be doing, how we're going to be doing it. Now is the time to really be starting to have some more in-depth of those discovery kind of discussions with some of your key customers, key prospects, and perhaps even perhaps maybe some clients that you've lost that you'd like to get back, but to have some really meaningful in-depth discussions around with them to really understand, what are their priorities, where are things at, where they need, because it's very important that you get a really strong understanding of that around with your customers, then in conjunction with what's going on with your industry, so that you can really start to prioritize and say, well, for whom do we need to be focusing on? What do we need to be doing? And then you can start to build out your overall plan, which you might have for, let's say, 12 months, but then let's prioritize and say, what are some of those initial activities and actions? Where do we need to be focusing on as part of moving forward?
Yep, fantastic. I think that's the way to put it. I guess what I'm saying too is what I'm experiencing is that, and maybe your experience as well, is those questions aren't often asked enough of those key buyers.
I 100% agree. Fully agree with you, Nick. And they definitely need to be asked. They need to be asked more often. And I do think, as part of, all SMEs, one of the key takeaways I really would like to kind of articulate really is that one of the key steps that all businesses need to be thinking about now, given where we're at, on the verge of September, is that you need to start thinking about, planning to move forward the end of 2020 for 2021. And your first step is you need to be having those discussions with your customers and prospects to get that depth of understanding, because you need to have a really granular level of what's going on, so you really can deliver to your business customers, to your buyer needs, which have really kind of raised the bar and reset. In conjunction with
that note, can I just add, Michael, that's a really good point. And it's not a bad way to start a conversation. Say, Michael, for this next quarter, moving into 2021, what does success look like for you?
Yeah. Asking that question of SMEs and their business owners. I mean, that's a really good question, and it promotes a lot of imagination, and it starts momentum, I think, in their mind as to what is possible. I think that's the way you're positioning it. But asking with that lead questions, like, wow, okay, that's worthy of challenge and worthy of effort.
Yes. The discovery process is really critical. It's a critical component in terms of your business planning process, and it needs to be a fundamental part of your account planning, and your sales process as well. Because there's a series of areas that you really want to get a deep dive in, which you won't necessarily cover off in necessarily one conversation. You might have a series of meetings, but it's very important that you really get that depth of an understanding. And for our viewers, in terms of if you want to gain some insights on that, on my website, listeninnovategrow.com, I do have my free playbook, Deciphering the Business Buyer, which outlines how to prepare for those meetings, what are some of the key questions that you need to ask, and also what are going to be some of the expectations that business buyers, decision makers will have from you. Because even having these initial discussions, buyers, everyone's very time poor. When you're going into those discussions, they're going to have expectations, what they want to be getting out of those meetings. So again, I have a free playbook, to give you some guidance in structuring those discussions, how to prepare for them, how to use the information. Again, the playbook, Deciphering the Business Buyer, is available at my website. It's free download, listeninnovategrow.com. So talking to customers.
It's a fantastic resource, Michael, can I say?
Oh, thank you. But it's just critical, and I cannot emphasize that enough. And in this environment where there are much higher demands, your business customers have tight budgets. They have high demand. They're dealing with uncertainty. They have their problems and objectives that they're trying to deal with. That you really have to be crystal clear and have that depth of understanding to know how you can be that partner, advisor, and navigator to them, which will enable you to, effectively sell. Nick, so talking to customers is number one. What would you say would be our, two other actionable items that, listeners who are listening live or via the recording should be taking subsequent to doing so? So talking to customers and getting that depth of understanding is number one. What would you say be two other key actionable steps that our fellow SMEs should be looking to undertake?
Yes, I'd like to talk to you about this, particularly moving into this post-COVID environment, and we're able then to consider who it is that we want as buyers too. That's another key question, given the changes within our organisations. Is who is our ideal clients, and who are that we want to work with, Michael? And I think that talking to you about the ideal client profiling, for instance. I think that's a key activity that an organisation can actually engage in to determine particularly what sort of messages and curation of messages can go to those buyers. First of all, obviously with that intelligence and gathering the data by asking buyers, how are we going? What does success look like for you? What does your future look like? What do you want to achieve? Through that discovery is then saying, well, who within that in the post-COVID environment is our ideal client? Who is it that we want to work with and play with? How can we best serve those individuals and businesses? And I think that's a massive piece, Michael, and something you offer clearly in your services is that ideal client profile. And that's resonated with a number of the people that I've spoken with, because it starts to have them focus clearly on those that they want to work with and those that are lesser of a risk to their organisation. And can I just say, by doing that and having that intelligence, it's a lovely segue and a bridge between marketing and sales to have those intelligent plans, I suppose, and client plans that you can service clients properly. So it's a lovely bridge between marketing and sales, such that the messaging is correct and we know who we want to target, and building out those client plans outside of that, which is the segue or the knock-on effect of an ideal client profile, has been great and of great benefit. So that is something as an exercise I know you offer, but I would suggest that have a look at who that ideal client is. What are the buyer behaviours associated with that group? And then how can we tailor our client plans to best service them? That's one offering, Michael,
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Nick, that I think, getting an understanding of, the current customers and buyers, customers that you're serving, and what are the needs of those buyers, those decision makers, and then having an understanding of what they require, what are you looking to do, looking at the risk, but where are you able to effectively service your customers as well, I think is also quite important. So that's also quite critical as well. So that listening, and then having an idea of where you should be focusing, which can then lead into you can start getting into your planning phase.
Absolutely. Yep. I think that's the next thing I was going to move into, but thank you. That's like gathering that data and then sitting with your team as a benchmark to say, well, I'm going to be establishing now the next quarter's plan, if you like. So I think that's the service that we actually offer. Sorry, Gunnar, are you there? Thanks, Gunnar. That's great. I think sitting around table, and this is where we facilitate these sessions, is to work out that 12-week plan and then commit resources and time to that particular plan, has us focused. And we talk about clarity. And as a service provider, we want to seek that clarity with our clients. Say, over the next 90 days, here's the number one priority with a set of subtasks that will lead to that outcome, considering all the information that we've just gathered at the front end. So that massive intelligence gathering, as we've just spoken about, coming together and working out that 90-day plan and that cycle of accountability, that would be the next step, Michael. And so the three aspects there tied together would be a wonderful offering and a start for SMEs and business owners.
Great synopsis there, Nick. So yeah, so again, to recap, I would say in terms of action items would be, say, step number 1, talk to a subset of some of your key clients and customers, and maybe even some of your prospects to kind of build that depth of understanding. And again, you know, you can, for some bit of guidance on preparing and some of those key questions, you can get that from the playbook list on innovategrow.com. Step number 2 is, once you've done some of those meetings, then to be having a look with your team. So bringing in, you know, your leadership team and having some discussions with the members of your team to say, based on what's out there in terms of where your clients and customers are at, you know, where some of the focus should be. And then from there, step number 3, starting to put some activities in place to start doing some of that strategic planning. That you can start to move forward. Again, building in, though, that flexibility, that cadence for review and reset.
Yeah.
Okay, that's been great. Any questions from our attendees who are on the call now before Nick and I wrap up?
Okay. Be quiet, Michael. I mean, I did have one that was given to me prior to the session. And I think it's well and truly in your wheelhouse here, because still at this point, you would have people in those sales positions particularly struggling across the virtual environment, because this environment is here to stay. The way that we're communicating now is here to stay. And the question was simple enough, but how can we address the issues between marketing and sales within our business? Now, there's a disconnect, I think, in that question. I didn't get to the actual bottom of that, but that was just posted to me. So I thought I'd throw that at you.
Okay, well, we could have a whole series of webinars and workshops on that. But in a nutshell, given where we're at today in terms of business customers, how they're making decisions in terms of them being self-educating, you've got multiple decision makers being involved. You know, what business customers are looking for, again, they're looking for guidance, they're looking for information, they're looking for solutions. Marketing, sales, and your client, your product delivery teams all need to work together in tandem. You cannot have these silos anymore. They all have to be working together, because you need to be providing the right kinds of information, tools, and advice, being it case studies, demonstrations, white papers, it could be workshops as well, as part of which decision makers are using as part of their discovery, as part of their buying process. You've got to be able to provide those information, tools, recommendations, and be able to give them access to them upfront. So that's going to necessitate really all the various departments working together in terms of enabling the buyers as they're making those decisions and asking those questions. And then, of course, you have the actual delivery of your product and or service, which is going to require, your client delivery team, your product teams, your service and support as well, because service and support is a key component as well. So I would say it's about really that cross-functional interaction and working together right from that whole discovery process, creating the right tools and information that your clients need, right through to delivery, through service and support. So it requires that integration, that cross-functional operating, that has to be integral now, both in your planning and in your execution in delivering and supporting your customers.
Yeah, that's a really excellent, Michael. That's a great summary. And I just want to add there that particularly the things that we spoke about as with your playbook, but then gathering the data from clients. I mean, we're looking at the same data, because buyers have particular needs. Then if we're looking at the same data, then we curate our messages accordingly and then align our resources accordingly. So, that front end of we're talking about, that massive information gathering, is really good data for both and can bring those camps together. We're looking at the same data, clearly.
Yeah. Yes, because it's about coordinating messaging, but it's also, what do we need to deliver to your customers to help them with the decision making? Do they want testimonials? Do they want case studies? Do they want to do workshops? Are they going to want free trials? Is it white papers? Is it webinars where they can distill information on their own? What combinations thereof? Because some of that you want to be able to provide so that they can self-serve themselves, because again, lots of decision makers are doing their own research, listening to podcasts, reading articles, listening to webinar recordings, etc. Some of it will be interactive, where they want to be in a workshop so they can see, get an understanding how you as a service provider works, what you're going to provide. Can I ask you those questions to work through different scenarios? So you need to get that understanding so you can provide the various kinds of tools, advice, different kinds of content, and I'm going to put that in quotes, that help them make their decision for those different members. So hence, again, it requires that cross-functional, it requires understanding and then cross-functional interaction across your team to be able to deliver to that, which SMEs, I strongly believe, are very well positioned to do so, because we're flexible, we're adaptable, we're smaller, more nimble than our big, larger corporate counterparts, where that's something that's been talked about and is much harder to achieve in much larger organizations.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks. That's the only question I had that was sent to me. Have you,
awesome.
You received any yourself?
I did receive 2, and actually both were really much along the lines of the marketing and sales. I got them by email, and they're both around that whole marketing, sales, customer experience. You know, how do we execute? How do we bring it all together? So that seems to be a common theme that some of the SMEs are recognizing that's quite important. And how do we execute?
I mean, that's a topic for another day, as you say, my friend.
Yes, we'll have to expand on that, because that has been, I did receive a couple emails on that. So that is, I think we'll be looking to do more of these live Q&As. So before we conclude, I'd like to thank the participants that have dialed in. We will have the recording available, because I know a few folks did come in late and a few had to drop in and out. So we will be making, Nick and I will be making this recording of the full session available to you. Please reach out if you have any further questions, or in terms of what you'd like to see in subsequent live stream discussions that Nick and I will be doing. You can send those to me at info@listeninnovategrow.com. And Nick and I will be working together to plan some more further interactive sessions over the coming months to help our fellow SMEs get paired to not only survive, but thrive as we move forward. All right, well, thank you everyone for attending. Nick, thanks. This has been a great discussion, and I look
forward. Pleasure as always, Michael. Thank you.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you all, and we'll be in touch. Have a good rest of your day, everyone.
Cheerio. Bye for now.
Ciao.